There is a moment in every person's life that splits their story into two parts. Before and after. For Diana Cole, that moment came on the most important day of her life. She was standing at the altar of St. Mark's Cathedral in Atlanta, Georgia, in a wedding gown that had taken 3 months to design. 600 guests filled the pews, family, colleagues, friends who had flown in from 4 different states. 12 bridesmaids stood in a perfect line. The string quartet had just finished playing. The minister was opening his book. Everything was perfect. And then her husband, the man she had loved for 11 years, the man she had sacrificed everything to support, the man who had promised to stand by her until death, turned to face the crowd. He cleared his throat. And what he said next would be replayed in whispers for years. What he did not know, what he could not have known, was that somewhere across town, in the offices of Meridian Capital Group, Diana's attorney was staring at his phone, waiting for one last signature to go through. A $200 million deal. The biggest real estate investment deal in the state of Georgia that year. A deal that Diana Cole had spent 4 years building from a single idea on a napkin. He humiliated her at the altar. She closed the deal from the parking lot. In her wedding dress. And what happened next? It changed everything. Stay with me. Because this story is not just about betrayal. It is about what a woman can do when the world tries to break her and she refuses to break. This is the story of Diana Cole. Before we continue, if you're new here, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. In my next video, I'll be picking a few new subscribers for a personal shout-out, and yours could be next. Today, I want to welcome Jocelyn from the United States, Wanda from Georgia, and Juliet from Jamaica. Thank you for joining us. Subscribe now and comment below so I can welcome you too. But before I take you inside the cathedral, I need you to understand a few things. I need you to understand who Diana was before all of this. Where she came from. What she had sacrificed. And why, of all the women in the world, she was perhaps the last one that Marcus Cole should have chosen to betray. Because Diana Cole was not just any woman. She was a builder. A strategist. A woman who had been quietly constructing something extraordinary while everyone around her assumed she was simply being a good wife. So here are the questions we are going to answer today. Why did Marcus choose their wedding day, the most public moment of their lives, to do what he did? Who was the woman standing in the second pew, wearing a dress that matched the bridesmaids just a shade too closely? What was on the phone call Diana received 40 minutes after walking out of that cathedral? And when Marcus finally learned the truth about what Diana had built, what did he do? What would you have done? Let us go back to the beginning. Because every story of betrayal starts long before the moment it explodes. It starts with a choice made years earlier that nobody recognized as dangerous at the time. Diana Cole was born Diana Reeves in Savannah, Georgia. She was the eldest daughter of a school principal and a nurse. Growing up, she watched her parents work double shifts, skip vacations, and argue quietly in the kitchen about money, not because they were irresponsible, but because life had a way of costing more than people planned for. From the time she was 12 years old, Diana had a notebook. Not a diary. A notebook. And in that notebook she did not write about boys or music or television. She wrote plans. She mapped out ideas. She calculated costs and returns. By 15 she had a small business selling handmade jewelry at the Savannah Saturday Market. By 17 she had saved enough to buy her first small investment, a storage unit she rented out to 3 different people. She had a mind for numbers. Not in a cold, academic way. In a living, breathing way. She could walk into a room and see opportunity where other people saw furniture. She could look at a struggling building and see what it could become with the right investment and the right vision. Her mother used to say, Diana does not just think about money. She thinks with money. And it was true. She met Marcus Cole when she was 22 years old at a real estate conference in Atlanta. She had just graduated from Georgia State University with a degree in business and finance. He had just launched his first small property management company. They were seated at the same roundtable discussion, and when the moderator asked for predictions about the Atlanta real estate market over the next decade, Diana was the first to raise her hand. She spoke for 4 minutes. She quoted statistics. She named specific neighborhoods. She predicted shifts in demographics and infrastructure that would reshape property values. When she finished, the entire table was quiet. Marcus was staring at her like he had never seen anything like her in his life. Afterward, he came to find her at the coffee station. "I have to ask you something," he said. "Go ahead," she said, not looking up from her notebook. "How do you know all of that?" She looked up then. She smiled, the kind of smile that said, "Because I never stopped paying attention." "I study," she said simply. "I pay attention. I plan." He handed her his card. She tucked it into her notebook without looking at it. He called her 3 days later. Their relationship grew slowly, the way real things grow. Not in a rush of passion that burns out in weeks, but through long conversations about ideas, about strategy, about the world they both wanted to build. They complemented each other in the early years. Marcus was magnetic, socially gifted, the kind of man who walked into a room and made everyone feel like they were the most important person there. Diana was the thinker, the planner, the one who made sure the ideas that Marcus pitched were grounded in something real. They made each other better. At least for a while. They got engaged after 4 years of dating. The proposal happened on the Savannah River waterfront at sunrise. Marcus had been planning it for months. Diana found out later that he had asked her father's permission, that he had coordinated with her best friend Simone to make sure Diana's favorite flowers were waiting. It was the most thoughtful thing he had ever done for her. She said yes before he even finished the question. The wedding was planned for 18 months later. Diana wanted time to do it right. She was also, quietly, working on the biggest project of her professional life. She called it Project Meridian. She had been building it for 2 years already. It was a $200 million mixed-use real estate development deal that would transform an underutilized industrial corridor on the south side of Atlanta into a community of affordable housing, retail space, and green infrastructure. It was the kind of project that real estate developers spent their entire careers dreaming about. It was the kind of project that, if it closed, would make Diana Cole one of the most significant real estate figures in the southeastern United States. She told almost no one about it. Not because she was secretive by nature, but because she had learned something painful in the months before. She had learned that the people closest to her did not always believe in what she was building. Including Marcus. Now here is what I need you to understand about those 18 months of wedding planning. While Diana was managing wedding vendors and seating charts and cake tastings, she was also managing 12 investor relationships, 3 legal teams, and a property acquisition that required more negotiation skill than most people exercise in an entire career. And while she was doing all of that, Marcus was growing impatient. He had started to see Diana differently. Not with admiration, with something closer to resentment. Because Marcus had believed he was marrying a brilliant woman who would be his partner. What he had not accounted for was the possibility that she might outgrow him. By the time the wedding was 6 weeks away, Diana had started noticing things. Marcus canceling dinner without explanation. Marcus going quiet when she talked about Project Meridian. Marcus spending more and more time with Carla Sims, his former business partner, a woman Diana had always sensed was too comfortable with her fiancé. She told herself she was imagining things. She was wrong. The morning of the wedding was the most beautiful morning Diana could remember. She woke up in the bridal suite at the Whitmore Hotel in Atlanta. Sunlight was coming through the curtains. Her bridesmaids were already there, 7 women who had been part of her life for years. Her mother arrived at 8 with coffee and tears in her eyes. Her younger sister did her makeup. Her best friend Simone helped her into the gown. Diana stood in front of the full-length mirror and felt something she rarely let herself feel in the middle of a project. Peace. This was right. This was good. Whatever complicated feelings she had been carrying about Marcus over the past few months, the distance, the silence, the strange new tension, she told herself it was just pre-wedding anxiety. She told herself that once they were married, once they were finally on the same side of this milestone, everything would settle back into what they had been. She was a planner. She believed in the plan. What she did not know was what was happening 2 floors below her in the lobby of that same hotel. Marcus Cole and Carla Sims were standing in a corner near the concierge desk, speaking in voices so low the staff could not hear them. Carla was holding something, a document, folded in thirds. She was pressing it into Marcus's hand. He was hesitating. She said something that made him close his fingers around it. Marcus put the folded document into the inside pocket of his jacket. He went upstairs to finish getting dressed. The ceremony began at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. St. Mark's Cathedral was one of the most breathtaking venues in Atlanta. Vaulted ceilings. Stained glass windows in blues and golds. White floral arrangements that had taken a team of 8 florists 2 full days to install. 600 guests in their finest clothes. The string quartet playing a piece Diana had chosen herself, a composition by a local musician she had discovered at a community concert 3 years earlier. Everything was perfect. Diana's father walked her down the aisle. She could feel the emotion radiating off him. She squeezed his arm. She looked ahead to the altar where Marcus was standing. He was handsome. Impeccably dressed. And for just a moment, just one, she saw him the way she had seen him on that first day at the conference. Magnetic. Certain. The man she loved. She exhaled. Her father placed her hand in Marcus's. The minister began. They read their vows. Diana had written hers herself. She spoke about partnership, about choosing someone every day, about what it meant to build a life with another person. Her voice only broke once, at the end, when she said, "I choose you, Marcus. Today and for every day after this one." The guests were moved. Several people were crying. Marcus's vows were shorter. He had written them the night before. They were fine. They were technically fine. The minister smiled. He reached the moment every wedding builds toward. If anyone here has cause to object to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace. Standard language. Ceremonial. No one ever actually. Marcus let go of Diana's hands. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. And he pulled out the folded document. Diana felt the shift before she understood it. Some part of her body registered the wrongness of the gesture, the way he unfolded the paper slowly, deliberately, the way the sound of 600 people breathing seemed to suddenly amplify in the silence. Marcus. He held up one hand. Not unkindly. But firmly. And then he turned to face the congregation. 600 people who had come to celebrate love. 600 people who were about to witness something else entirely. "I cannot do this," he said. His voice was quiet at first, then it grew. "I am sorry for what I'm about to do. I know this is not the time. But I would be lying to all of you if I stood here and said these vows. And I have spent too many years of my life not saying what I mean." Diana heard the words but they did not compute. She was still holding her bouquet. The white roses she had chosen. She was still wearing the dress. She was still in the middle of her wedding. "Diana is a remarkable woman," Marcus continued. And the way he said it, with a kind of distant admiration, the way you might describe someone you used to know, made the blood drain from her face. "She has always been remarkable. But I think we both know that we have been growing in different directions for a long time. And I think you deserve someone who—" "Stop." Her voice came out from somewhere she did not know she had. It was quiet. But it cut through the cathedral like a knife through silk. He stopped. She looked at him. She looked at the paper in his hand. "What is that?" He swallowed. "Diana. What is that document, Marcus?" He held it out to her. She did not take it. He laid it on the communion rail beside them. Divorce petition. Filed that morning. Before the ceremony. Before she had walked down the aisle. He had filed for divorce before she walked down the aisle. She heard the sound of the congregation differently then. Not as warmth. As witnesses. 600 people witnessing the most humiliating moment of her life. And then, from the second pew on the left, Carla Sims stood up. She was wearing ivory. Not quite white. But close enough. She was wearing ivory to Diana's wedding. And Marcus, the man Diana had chosen, the man she had loved for 11 years, turned to look at Carla the way he should have been looking at his bride. What happens next is something Diana has described as the strangest association of her life. She says it was as if she stepped slightly outside of her own body and watched herself from a few feet away. She watched herself standing at the altar in her wedding dress. She watched the minister's stunned face. She watched her mother stand up in the front pew with her hand over her mouth. She watched her father start to move toward the altar, and watched Simone gently hold him back. And she watched herself do something no one expected. She picked up the divorce petition from the communion rail. She folded it once, twice, 3 times. She tucked it into her bouquet. And she looked Marcus directly in the eye. "All right," she said. Just those 2 words. "All right." Then she turned, walked back down the aisle she had come up 4 minutes before, and walked out of St. Mark's Cathedral into the afternoon sun. If this story has your stomach in knots right now, comment, "Still here, Diana," below. Let me see who is writing this out with me. Because I promise you, what comes next is going to change everything you thought you understood about this story. She sat down on the stone steps of the cathedral. Not on a bench. Not in a car. On the steps. In her wedding dress. She was not crying. She did not feel anything yet. That would come later, the grief and the fury and the bone-deep exhaustion of having loved someone who was not worth the love. But in that moment, she felt nothing. She was simply existing in the space between what had been and what would come next. Simone came out first. She did not say anything. She just sat down beside her. Diana stared at the parking lot. She thought about all of the things she had organized to get to this day. The seating chart she had revised 9 times. The menu she had tasted and adjusted and tasted again. The honeymoon itinerary she had carefully constructed, 2 weeks in Portugal, because Marcus had always said he wanted to see Lisbon. She had planned it all. She had planned everything. She had not planned for this. Inside the cathedral, she could hear the low murmur of 600 people processing what had just happened. She could hear her father's voice, raised slightly, arguing with someone. She could hear the minister saying something she could not make out. She did not go back in. She sat on those steps and she breathed. Her phone had been silenced for the ceremony. She took it out of the small silk bag that had been tied to her bouquet and looked at the screen. 14 missed calls. 3 from her attorney, James Whitmore. 2 from an international number she did not immediately recognize. The rest from family and colleagues who had presumably already heard something through the extraordinary speed of social media. She called James back first. James Whitmore had been Diana's attorney for 6 years. He was one of the few people who knew the full scope of Project Meridian. He had been with her through every negotiation, every setback, every near collapse of the deal. He picked up on the first ring. Diana. His voice was careful. Controlled. But there was something underneath it she had never heard from him before. Something that sounded very close to barely contained elation. James. Talk to me. Where are you? The steps of St. Mark's Cathedral. In my wedding dress. My attorney called me 14 times and I would like to know why. A pause. And then James said 7 words that Diana Cole will carry with her for the rest of her life. Diana. The deal just closed. It closed. She says she did not understand at first. The words did not connect to their meaning. Her brain was still processing the altar, the divorce petition, Marcus's face turning toward Carla Sims. Say that again, she said. Meridian Capital signed 30 minutes ago. The full $200 million. Diana, the deal is done. You did it. She looked down at the divorce petition, still folded into her bouquet. She looked up at the Georgia sky, blue and enormous and completely indifferent to human drama. And she started to laugh. It was not a happy laugh. Not exactly. It was the laugh of someone who has just received information so absurdly, cosmically ironic that there is no other appropriate response. The biggest deal of her career. The project she had spent 4 years building. $200 million, closed at 1:47 p.m. on the day her fiancé chose to destroy their relationship at the altar. Simone was looking at her with alarm. Diana. I'm fine, Diana said. And then, quietly, to the sky, I am actually fine. She told James she would call him in 2 hours. She hung up. She sat for a moment longer on those steps, with Simone beside her and the sound of 600 confused people behind the glass. Then she stood up, smoothed the front of her wedding dress, and said to Simone, I need to change my clothes. And then I need to go to work. Simone stared at her. You were just at the altar. I know where I was, Diana said. I know exactly where I was. And now I know exactly where I am going. Can you get the car? But before they left, something happened that would become the final piece of the puzzle Diana had been assembling without knowing it. Her cousin Jerome, a quiet man who had been seated near the back of the cathedral and had watched the whole thing unfold, came outside and pressed a folded napkin into her hand. You need to know something, he said. I heard them talking before the ceremony. Carla and Marcus. In the lobby. I heard what she said to him. Diana looked at the napkin. Jerome had written 3 sentences on it. She read them. She folded the napkin and put it in her small silk bag. "Thank you, Jerome," she said. She would not share those 3 sentences publicly for another 18 months. But when she did, when the full story finally came out, it changed everything people thought they understood about Marcus Cole's motivations. More on that soon. For the next several weeks, Diana did something that most people in her situation would have been unable to do. She worked. She worked harder than she had ever worked in her life. Not to forget what had happened. Not to numb herself. But because she understood something that would take Marcus a long time to learn. Forward motion is the only antidote to devastation. You do not heal by sitting still. You heal by building something. She hired a divorce attorney within 48 hours, a woman named Patricia Osei who had a reputation for being absolutely meticulous and completely without mercy in asset protection cases. Because here was the thing that Marcus had not considered when he filed for divorce before the ceremony. He had filed before the marriage was legally solemnized. Which meant, technically, legally, they had never been married. Which meant he had no claim to anything Diana had built. Including Project Meridian. Including the $200 million that was now, as of 1:47 p.m. on what should have been their wedding day, entirely and exclusively hers. Patricia reviewed the timeline with Diana during their first meeting. He filed the divorce petition that morning, Patricia said, reading through the documents. Before the ceremony. Before the legal marriage took place. Yes. And the ceremony did not reach completion. No. Patricia set the documents down and looked at Diana. Then there is nothing to divorce, she said. He filed papers to end a marriage that never legally began. Which means he has no standing. No claim. Nothing. Diana nodded slowly. And the deal, Project Meridian, was built entirely on assets registered in your name, through your LLC, before any joint financial agreement was established. Patricia paused. Diana. He has nothing. He is entitled to nothing. The only thing Marcus Cole has successfully accomplished is humiliating himself in front of 600 people at one of Atlanta's most prominent venues. Diana was quiet for a moment. Good, she said. She signed the paperwork. She let the legal team handle everything. And she turned her full attention back to Project Meridian. Because there was still a great deal of work to do. The deal had closed, but the development had not even begun. $200 million was the starting point, not the finish line. There were construction contracts to negotiate, community partnerships to establish, timelines to set. There were city council meetings and infrastructure reviews and zoning approvals that required Diana's personal presence. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, for weeks after the altar, Diana's phone rang with a number she did not recognize. She almost did not answer. She was glad she did. The call was from a woman named Vivian Okafor. She introduced herself as a journalist with the Atlanta Business Chronicle. She said she had been covering real estate development in Georgia for 11 years. She said she had heard about Project Meridian, not the full story, but enough to know it was significant. And she said she had also heard what happened at St. Mark's Cathedral. I want to tell your story, Vivian said. But I want to tell the real story. Not the gossip version. Not the jilted bride version. The full version. What you built, and what happened, and how you're moving forward. Diana was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'll give you 1 hour. Come to my office. They met the following Tuesday. Diana's office was on the 14th floor of a building in Midtown Atlanta with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She was wearing a navy blazer and had a cup of coffee. She looked like someone who had slept well and had a great deal of work to do before noon. She did not look like someone whose wedding had fallen apart 3 weeks earlier. Vivian noticed this. How are you doing? She asked, with genuine curiosity rather than sympathy. I am extremely busy, Diana said. Which is exactly where I need to be. The interview lasted 3 hours. Diana talked about Project Meridian, its origins, its obstacles, its significance for the communities it would serve. She talked about her career, her background, her philosophy of real estate development as an instrument of community building rather than simply profit extraction. She talked about the years of relationship building that had made the deal possible, the investors who had believed in her when the project was nothing more than a series of spreadsheets and a vision statement. And then, toward the end, Vivian asked about the wedding. I know you might not want to speak about it, Vivian said carefully. I'll speak about what matters, Diana said. She reached into her desk drawer and took out the folded napkin Jerome had pressed into her hand on the cathedral steps. She smoothed it open on the desk. She looked at it for a moment. Then she told Vivian what the 3 sentences said. Marcus Cole had not walked to that altar intending to humiliate Diana. He had walked to that altar because Carla Sims had told him something that morning that she believed would protect him, and that she calculated would destroy Diana. What Carla told Marcus was this. She said that Project Meridian was failing. She said she had a source inside the investment group who had told her the deal was falling apart, that the investors were backing out, that Diana had been covering up the collapse for months. She said that if Marcus married Diana that day, he would be legally tied to her debts. She said that the smart thing, the only smart thing, was to file for divorce before the ceremony, on the grounds of financial misrepresentation, and walk away clean. She had manufactured an entire fiction. A deliberate, calculated lie. Designed to push Marcus into humiliating Diana on the one day when it would cause maximum damage. Because Carla Sims had known about Project Meridian for longer than Marcus had. She had known about it because she had once been Diana's business contact, years before she became Marcus's partner. She had seen the early models. She had understood what it could become. And she had been slowly, methodically positioning herself to take a piece of it, if she could separate Diana from the protective buffer of a solid personal life. It had not been about love. It had been about money. Carla had used Marcus. She had fed him a lie that she knew his insecurities would make him believe. She had exploited his worst quality, his fear of being left behind by Diana's success, and she had weaponized it into the most public betrayal imaginable. And Marcus, who had loved Diana in his imperfect and insufficient way, had believed her. Vivian Okafor sat across from Diana for a long time after she finished speaking. What do you want people to know? She finally asked. Diana folded the napkin again and held it in both hands. I want people to know that the deal closed, she said. At 1:47 p.m. While I was sitting on the steps of that cathedral in my wedding dress. I want people to know that I did not fall apart. I want people to know that what was built cannot be unbuilt by a lie or a broken engagement or a public humiliation. I want people to know that the only thing that happens when someone tries to take something from you at your lowest moment is that they reveal exactly who they are. And what about Marcus? Diana thought for a moment. I feel sorry for Marcus, she said. And she meant it. He was manipulated by someone who knew exactly how to get to him. He made a terrible choice. But the choice was made on a foundation of lies that someone else built. That doesn't excuse him. But it explains him. And Carla Sims? Diana was quiet for a longer beat. Carla will encounter consequences, she said, that have nothing to do with me. What you build on deception has a very short foundation. And I am very patient. The article ran the following Sunday. It was headlined, The $200 Million Bride, How Diana Cole Closed the Biggest Real Estate Deal in Georgia on the Day Her Wedding Fell Apart. It was shared 40,000 times in the first 24 hours. It was picked up by 3 national outlets. And it began a conversation across the country about women, business, betrayal, and what it looks like to refuse to let someone else write the ending of your story. Right now, I want to know something. If you were in Diana's position, sitting on those cathedral steps, what would your first phone call have been? Comment below. Would you have called your lawyer? Your mother? Your best friend? Or would you have sat in silence and let the world wait? Tell me. 1 year after the wedding that never was, Diana Cole stood in front of 200 people at the groundbreaking ceremony for Meridian South, the first phase of the development that Project Meridian would build on the south side of Atlanta. She was wearing a hard hat over a blazer. She was holding a ceremonial shovel. And she was smiling in a way that had nothing to do with cameras or crowds. It was the smile of someone who has done the work they were meant to do, and who knows it. In the 18 months since the cathedral, her life had changed in ways she was still sometimes surprised by. Project Meridian had expanded beyond the original scope. The success of the initial deal had attracted additional investors, extending the project across 3 phases and adding a community health center and a small business incubator to the original design. The project would ultimately create over 400 permanent jobs. Diana had been featured on the covers of 2 national business magazines. She had been invited to speak at the Kennedy Center. She had been appointed to a state advisory board on community development. She had mentored 11 young women in real estate, several of whom had gone on to close their own significant deals. She had rebuilt her life not from the bottom, but from exactly where she had been standing on those cathedral steps. The foundation was always there. She had just needed the noise to clear so she could see it. She had not, in that time, been in a relationship. Not because she did not want connection, but because she had learned something important. The quality of who you are when you are alone determines the quality of what you will eventually build with someone else. She was taking her time. She was not in a hurry. She had learned, definitively, that the right person waits. What happened to Marcus? The story there is both simpler and more complicated than people expected. After the cathedral, Marcus found himself in a position that no amount of magnetic personality could fully navigate. The story spread. The article in the Atlanta Business Chronicle was read by people who knew him professionally. The details of what he had done, filing divorce papers before the ceremony, listening to Carla's fabrications, walking to the altar with the intention of publicly dismantling the woman who had believed in him for 11 years, those details lived on the internet in a way that followed him. He lost 2 business contracts in the 2 months after the wedding. A third partnership fell through when his prospective partner's wife read the article. He called Diana twice. She did not answer. He wrote her a letter. It was long. It was, by all accounts, genuine. She read it once. She put it in a drawer. She went back to work. 3 months after the cathedral, he reached out through Simone, asking if Diana would be willing to speak with him for 15 minutes. Just 15 minutes. She agreed. They met at a coffee shop downtown. Diana arrived first. She ordered a coffee. She was reviewing notes on her phone when Marcus came in. He looked different. Quieter. Like someone who had spent several weeks confronting something uncomfortable about himself and had not yet fully made peace with what he found. He sat across from her. He did not try to hug her. "I owe you an explanation," he said. "I know what Carla told you," Diana said. "I know she lied. And I know you believed her." He was quiet for a moment. "I should not have believed her." "No," Diana agreed. "You should not have. You should have talked to me. That is what partners do. They talk to each other." "I know. You had 11 years of evidence about who I am," she said. "And you chose a conversation in a hotel lobby over 11 years of evidence. That is not Carla's failure. That is yours." He did not argue with her. They sat in silence for a while. Then Diana stood up. "I don't hate you, Marcus," she said. "I genuinely do not. I think you were afraid that I was going to outgrow the life we had planned, and that fear made you vulnerable to exactly the wrong person at exactly the wrong moment. I understand how that happens." She picked up her coffee. "But I also cannot unknow what you did. And I'm not interested in going backward." She left. That was the last conversation they had. What happened to Carla Sims? The Atlanta Business Chronicle article had identified Carla as a key figure in the events at the cathedral without naming her directly, but in a community as interconnected as Atlanta's business world, enough people understood who was being described. 6 weeks after the article ran, 2 of Carla's existing clients quietly ended their contracts. A third brought in an independent review of their shared business accounts and found discrepancies that led to a more complicated legal situation. Diana had not called anyone. She had not spoken to anyone about Carla beyond what she told Vivian Okafor. She had not needed to. What is built on deception has a very short foundation. Diana had been patient. At the groundbreaking ceremony, a reporter from a local news station asked Diana a question as she was making her way toward the podium. "Ms. Cole," the reporter said, "a lot of people have called your story inspiring. Is that how you see it?" Diana paused. "I see it as accurate," she said. "I built something. I faced something difficult. I kept building. That is not inspiration, that is just the work." "And the wedding day? Do you ever wish it had gone differently?" Diana considered this seriously. As if it were a real question deserving a real answer. "No," she said finally. "I do not. Because if the deal had not closed that day, if James Whitmore had not called me on those steps, I might have spent years trying to fit my life back into a shape that was not actually made for me. The humiliation was the gift. I just did not know it yet." She walked to the podium. She lifted the ceremonial shovel. And she broke ground. I want to talk to you directly for a moment. If you have stayed with this story, if you have been here from those first moments in the cathedral all the way to the groundbreaking, I want you to understand why this story matters. Not just as drama. Not just as a remarkable sequence of events. But as something you can carry with you. Diana Cole's story is not a story about a lucky woman. It is not a story about revenge, though there are consequences in it. It is not a story about a deal that happened to close at the perfect moment, though the timing is extraordinary. It is a story about what you do in the 30 seconds after everything falls apart. Diana sat on those cathedral steps. She held the divorce petition that had been meant to destroy her. She heard her attorney's voice telling her that the biggest deal of her life had just closed. And in that moment, she made a decision that had nothing to do with Marcus, nothing to do with Carla, nothing to do with 600 witnesses or a cathedral full of white roses. She decided to stand up. That is the whole story. That is the only story that matters. You may not be closing a $200 million deal. You may not be standing at an altar when your world shifts. But I promise you, every single person watching this has experienced, or will experience, a moment when someone they trusted turned away. When something they planned fell apart. When the version of the future they were counting on simply stopped being available. And in that moment, you have one decision to make. You can stay on the steps. Or you can stand up. Diana Cole chose to stand up. Not because she was fearless. Not because she was not hurt. She was devastated. She cried alone in her apartment for 3 nights after the cathedral. She called Simone at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday and could not even form sentences. She lay in her bedroom in the dark and felt the full weight of 11 years of love and trust dissolving into something she did not have a name for yet. She felt all of it. And then she went to work. Because she had understood, somewhere deep in her core, that the only thing that could not be taken from her was the thing she kept choosing to build. Not the deal. Not the money. Not the status. The discipline of standing up when you would prefer to lie down. That is what no one can take from you. That is what Diana Cole built on. And that, if you will let it, is what you can build on, too. Not every loss is the end. Some losses are simply the architecture of a beginning you could not have designed on your own. Diana Cole walked out of St. Mark's Cathedral carrying a divorce petition and a $200 million deal. She only chose to keep one of them. Before you go anywhere, I need you to sit with me for just one more minute. Because I have been thinking about this question the entire time I have been telling you Diana's story. What would you have done? I am serious. I want to know. If you were Diana, standing on those cathedral steps, 600 people inside, the divorce petition in your bouquet, and your phone rang with news that the biggest opportunity of your life had just come through, what would your first move be? Would you go back inside? Would you confront Marcus in front of everyone? Would you disappear entirely and let the lawyers handle everything? Would you have called your mother first, or your best friend, or your attorney? And here is the deeper question I really want to hear your thoughts on. Do you believe that what happened to Diana, the timing of that phone call, the way the deal closed at exactly the moment her world was collapsing, was coincidence? Or do you believe there is something bigger at work in stories like this? I have my own thoughts. But I want to hear yours first. Comment below. Let this be a real conversation. I read every single comment and I respond to as many as I can. This channel exists because you are here, and I do not take that for granted. If this story moved you, if you found yourself holding your breath in that cathedral, or feeling something shift when Diana said, "All right," and walked back down that aisle, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Someone going through something hard. Someone who is sitting on their own cathedral steps right now and is not sure whether to stand up. Send it to them. Sometimes the right story at the right moment is all it takes. And if you are new to this channel and you made it all the way to this moment, welcome. You belong here. Subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss another story like this one. We go deep here. We tell the truth here. And we believe, absolutely, that stories have the power to change how we see ourselves and each other. I will be back soon with another story. One that starts with a question I think is going to stay with you for a long time. Until then, keep building. Whatever it is you are building. Keep building it.